In the opening scene, we see the hectic schedule of the newly engaged couple. While walking down the stairs, Brian notices that they need to be repaired, so he lets Jenny know about it. As they walk out of the house, Jenny can't help but appreciate the fall that's about to come to their county. Jenny is very excited about the opening of the inn and wants every detail to be perfect as she keeps adding different things to buy to the list. As they walk down the streets of Buck County, Jenny spots a wedding dress that she is in love with. Jenny expresses her excitement as she will be wearing a wedding dress soon. As they continue their walk to the antique shop, they reminisce about the time they first met and how successful their lives and their relationship have been. After looking in the shop for a while, Jenny finally spots a drawer that looks perfect for the inn. But once Brian checks the price of that one, they opt for a similar one. A lady behind them can't help but overhear their conversation, so she chimes in to tell them that a lamp is coming free with every drawer purchased. Getting excited about the deal, Jenny promises the woman to give it a great home, but the woman can't help but laugh at her emotional attachment to it. Returning to their home, Jenny experiments with some sweets so she can take them to the coffee shop, and Brian decides to try one. Not wanting to ruin her mood, he lets her know that some things need to be fixed in the house, but he assures her that he'll take care of them as she complains about already having a lot on her list. They have renovated the kitchen and that has cost them all of their savings, but Brian doesn't regret doing so because it makes Jenny happy. Not only does she love baking, but she lets Brian know that having the engagement ring on makes her cook even better. Their romantic moment is interrupted by the phone ringing. But it's good news since they get their first reservation on October 10th by the Stanleys. Proud of his fiancée, Brian congratulates her before feeding the goats. After taking care of the goats outside, they go to the guest room to put some finishing touches. Brian hopes their musical plumbing and some other unique defect wouldn't be weird to the guests. Looking around the room, Jenny says that they should get some stuff for the bedroom like embroidered pillows and some fresh flowers to make it more welcoming. Becoming overwhelmed all of a sudden, Brian sits down to take it all in while admitting that he's trying to get used to the new life. Used to be on Wall Street, he finds it hard to adjust to the slower pace of quiet country life. Concerned, Jenny asks him if he's content with his current life and he assures her that he is. Looking to their left, they can't help but burst into laughter when they see how badly Brian had placed the curtain hanger. Jenny assures him that no one will notice once they put the curtains on. On her way out, she lets him know about the blogger The Out-of-Towner and how they need to improve their Wi-Fi since it's important for the reviews. So naturally, Brian promises to look into it. Bringing some of her new desserts to the coffee shop, Jenny expects to get good feedback, but is met with exciting news from Casey. She lets her know that her boss is retiring, so she can officially buy the cafe, which means that she will be taking all of Jenny's sweets to the coffee shop. Worried about the fact that many B&Bs are opening, Jenny hopes that her cooking will separate theirs from the crowd, but Casey assures her that her cooking is amazing. Outside the general store, we see the old gentleman that always sits there. Brian greets him, and as he sits down next to him, the man compliments him on how long he has gotten since first inheriting the house. Brian agrees to have had his life turned upside down, but every time he looks into Jenny's eyes, he is reminded that that's the man he wants to be. Jenny greets them as she lets the old man know about the opening of Emily's Inn. Noticing his suitcase, Brian asks the man where he's going, and he says that he's going to a wedding, which is just a warm-up for Jenny and Brian's. The bus finally arrives, and as Brian helps the man get to it, he is warned that it will rain since the man has pain in his knees. Getting into the general store, Brian greets some of the locals before finally coming to the counter. He sees the plumber Tommy and asks for some supplies to fix the drawers. Tommy asks how Jenny likes the new kitchen, and Brian reminds him that she's a professional chef, comparing her to Picasso. Rusty, a rather known local, chimes in to complain about his ex-wife turning the home that he built into a bed and breakfast. Through conversation, Tommy asks Brian whether he and Jenny will be coming to the festival that night, and when he declines, Rusty tells him that he has to come since his band will be playing. After dropping the sweets at the cafe, Jenny heads to her neighbor Alice so they can see some covers for the inn. As they're working, Jenny expresses her gratitude towards Alice, and Alice lets her know that she and Brian have filled the county with joy since arriving. Excitedly, Jenny lets Alice know that she has seen a dress she likes, which only makes Alice wonder when the wedding will be. Sadly, Jenny reveals that they're too busy and that they don't have the financial stability to have a worry-free wedding. Returning home, she sees Brian working on the drawer, and as he finishes, he lets her know that they're going on a date. Same as him, Jenny can't help but laugh at the idea that Rusty's in a band, but she gets ready, and they head out to the concert. Happy about them going on a date, Jenny thinks about everything they went through to get where they are now. Rusty and his band finally start playing, and Jenny and Brian seem surprised by how good they are. Moved by the romantic music, Brian asks Jenny for a dance, so they join the rest of the couples and dance all night long. The romantic atmosphere is filled with couples showing affection to each other, on top of that with some fall rain. However, their romance is interrupted as a big storm hits, cutting the power off. Soaked from the rain, Jenny and Brian rush to get inside before catching a cold. The storm doesn't seem to be calming down as we see Brian trying to fix the roof the following day. His work gets interrupted, which makes the ceiling leak more water, forcing Jenny to use Casey's kitchen. Despite trying, Brian doesn't manage to fix the roof, so he spends the night at Tommy's. After finding out how bad the situation is, Tommy offers to fix the roof for them, being the good friend that he is. The following day, Brian lets Jenny know that his room is completely soaked as they go over the guest rooms. Overwhelmed by the chaos in the house, Jenny gets upset as she thinks that all of her dreams are ruined, but Brian cheers her up as he reminds her that the first time they kissed is in the spot they were standing. The storm goes away and the sun comes out as Jenny and Brian go over their yard, fixing everything that might have been ruined in the storm. Preparing sweets in the coffee shop, Jenny begins to feel bad about using Casey's kitchen, so she suggests providing baked goods and using the kitchen when the coffee shop is closed, which Casey agrees to. The closer the opening day comes, the more nervous Jenny gets. Despite having the guests to worry about, Jenny can't help but think that Brian is overwhelmed by the inn, which leads to him distancing himself. Casey advises her to ask him what is the first thing she does when she gets home. He assures her that he's not overwhelmed and that he can't wait for it to open. As he leans in for a kiss, the phone rings, interrupting him from doing so. Another guest makes a reservation by the name of Mr. Albert, and the couple couldn't be happier. Immediately, they head to the rooms to fix everything that is needed. Getting down the stairs, Brian spots Jenny trying to open the drawer, so he reminds her that it's an antique and that she has to wait for it to dry out. To cheer her up, he brings up a pair of old high heels that look like Emily's. Jenny gets soft immediately and Brian can't help but wonder how she can be attached to a person she never knew. She reminds him that if it weren't for Emily, they would have never met, so he agrees with her. Jokingly, he lets her know that half of the pair is his, so she hands him one shoe before he exits the room dramatically. Brian decides to move to the stairs next and try to fix the squeaky noise. After some time, Jenny finds him seated next to his room with a rather disappointed face. It turns out that the stairs are not fixable, but Jenny assures him that she loves squeaky stairs. As Brian's sitting down doing some work, he gets a call from Harry checking up on him. Brian lets him know that he's going to try consulting as a way of making money, and Harry can't help but poke fun at him trying to do business in the county. The roof finally gets to be fixed as we see Tommy and Brian working on it. After dropping pasties at the coffee shop, Jenny returns home to a rather optimistic Brian, helpful that the roof will be over soon. They sit down to try Jenny's waffles and Brian struggles to find the appropriate adjective for it. Later in the afternoon, as Jenny's making some more waffles, Alice walks in to deliver 2 buckets of apples. Excitedly, Jenny lets her know that they have a new reserver and Alice couldn't be more proud. Reading blogs about different B&Bs has inspired Jenny to be more creative with her designs, but she reveals that they can't afford to buy new things now. Alice lets her know that there's a county fair where she can sell her goods to make some money, and Jenny agrees that it's a good idea. Not only is the fair a good idea, Brian gets a good deal out of it as well. Roger, one of his former major clients, walks to their booth and immediately recognizes Brian. He had helped him close a deal once, so to return the gesture, Roger buys a box of sweets without asking for the change back. After a long day at the fair, they manage to sell the whole batch, so they head home satisfied. Returning home may not be the best way to relax as they continue working on the rooms after a short break. As Jenny's washing the dishes, Brian asks her to step aside as he's going to fix the musical sink. She tries to talk him out of it, but he is confident that he'll manage to do it. Right as he's about to start working on it, he gets a call from Harry asking him to help Roger close a deal. Surprised by the sudden offer, Brian admits that he could use the money and he decides to accept and work on Wall Street for a couple of days. Jenny couldn't be happier that he gets a chance to do what he loves for a while, but little does she know what's about to come. The next morning, we see Brian saying goodbye to the goats before getting into his Jeep. Jenny comes out to say goodbye and helps him clean off the sheep fluff he has on his suit. The Stanleys are about to come, and even though Brian is saddened that he can't greet them, Jenny reminds him that he can do that when he comes back. Some time passes before the Stanleys arrive, and they seem to be a wonderful couple. She lets them into their room and they seem to love it. Assuming that they might be hungry, Jenny asks them whether they want brunch and they say they do. Trying her delicious pancakes, Nora lets Jenny know that she can be a chef, so Jenny lets her know that she used to work as one. Curious, Wayne asks whether Emily will be joining them, and Jenny lets him know that she'll be with them in spirit as she proceeds to tell them the whole story behind the inn. Already impressed by the hospitality, the couple lets Jenny know that they have made the right choice in choosing where to stay. Jenny doesn't seem to be the only one having a fantastic first day. Brian has a fantastic day as well. His knowledge impresses Roger as he manages to get closer to closing the deal with a major client. Mr. Albert arrives at the inn later in the afternoon as well, so we see Jenny guiding him to his room. After a successful meeting, Brian is offered a great deal on another consulting with Roger, and Harry chimes in to accept it for him. Noticing that he's worried, Harry lets him know that Roger isn't a tough guy, but Brian reveals that it is Jenny who he's worried about. Trying to bring Brian back into the game, Harry assures him that he can manage 2 weeks without Jenny, and that he can go back to his goats after work. Getting home late, Brian sees Jenny about to leave, so he asks her for a chat. Concerned, he lets her know that Roger had asked him to close another deal, as he assures her that it will be no more than 2 weeks. Truly happy for her fiancé, she assures him that she's okay with it before leaving to go to the coffee shop. She says goodbye to Brian the next morning and heads to the kitchen to make breakfast. Alice also joins them, and as Jenny serves breakfast, Nora asks about Brian. She assures them that they will meet him when he comes back, so the Stanleys head into town to find a new lamp. Jenny lets Mr. Albert know that Alice is her neighbor and that the beautiful garden belongs to her. Impressed by Alice's skills, Mr. Albert lets her know that since he's retired, all he wants to do is relax and go fishing, so she lets him know that she has a fishing boat. Seeing them connect, Jenny decides to leave them alone for some privacy. After dropping off the sweets at the cafe, Jenny confides in Casey that she's missing Brian, but she reminds her that it's only temporary. As Casey gets out to serve the ladies, we see an unfamiliar girl with one local. The local girl asks her what she's doing in the county, and that is when we find out that the mystery girl is behind the out-of-towner. She has come to the county to see why so many inns have been opened and if they're any good. The local girl asks Casey whether she knows any good inns, and Casey recommends Emily's Inn. Saying goodbye to Brian once again for work, Jenny lets him know that she misses him, and he tells her that he misses her as well, before rushing to get to the station. As if missing her fiancé wasn't enough, the power in the inn goes out, stressing Jenny even more. Instead of making a big deal about it, the guests and Jenny sit around a campfire, enjoying the beautiful starry night. While the guests seem to be enjoying the sudden change, Jenny can't help but worry about it and Brian. The fact that they keep asking to meet him doesn't help either. Seeing that he's late for the train, Brian rushes out of the office and makes it home late. Unfortunately, the whole house needs to be rewired, which is something the couple can't afford. Being as positive as he can, Brian assures Jenny that he'll get the money. All he needs to do is work for Roger a bit more. Just as they're about to sweeten the situation with a kiss, Nora comes in, interrupting their moment. She apologizes and asks for some more candles, and Jenny thanks her for being understanding. Instead of complaining, Nora reveals that she loves the change since it got her and Mr. Stanley to talk to each other. Jenny falls into Brian's arms as the exhaustion from it all gets to her. The next morning, Brian is working with Tommy when he asks him whether he's changing. Brian assures him that he's not and even shows him the pictures of his bay goats on his phone as proof. Tommy advises him not to let the suit change him, and Brian promises that it never will. Later in the afternoon, Jenny gets a call from the out-of-towner asking for a room, but she doesn't know that it's her. Realizing that she's an amateur, the unknown girl gets annoyed at the fact that Jenny tells her that they don't have power, so she books a room for the next week. While making sweets with Casey, Jenny complains about their financial situation and how it has pushed Brian to return to Wall Street, which is something she doesn't like. But Casey asks her whether that's what he likes, and that gets Jenny thinking. Before Brian leaves for work the next morning, he sits with Jenny to let her know that he'll be staying at Harry's for a week since the traveling is taking a toll on him, and she tells him that she's fine with it. Before leaving, he reminds her that it's just temporary and that they'll be back to their normal life soon. After another successful closing, Harry congratulates Brian by giving him an office, despite his work being temporary. As Brian sits working in his new office, he gets a call from Jenny letting him know that her distributor might be dropping her off because they're being bought off. Brian calms her down and advises her to meet up with the distributors to see where they stand before hanging up. Jenny doesn't get anything from the meeting but a cold shoulder. They let her know that she'll have to move to Pittsburgh and use cheaper ingredients if she wants to continue production, and that is something she doesn't want. Luckily for her, the unknown girl who goes by the fake name Denise arrives at the inn, and while Jenny is happy to see her there, Denise doesn't look so impressed. After settling in her room, she takes notes of the room and its surroundings while recording a voice note when Jenny knocks on her door. As she handles her fresh towels, she asks her what coffee she likes, but Denise lets her know that she prefers tea. Still not impressed by the inn, Denise calls it a bust and very basic. Serving her a big bowl of blueberry scones, Jenny is met with a confused Denise as to why she's made so much food. However, Jenny lets her know that Tommy will be joining, and as he enters the room, Denise seems to have fallen in love. She can't keep her gaze off him, so he assumes it is because of him filling his plate with scones, so he asks her to try one. After tasting the delicious treat, she comes back to her senses and realizes that it is a good scone indeed. Brian's absence seems something that Jenny's getting used to, as he isn't the person she wants to call first anymore, claiming that she's not the one that got away. Brian admits to being confused as well, as he holds a briefcase in one hand, and a toolbox seems to be in another. Harry lets him know that he doesn't see him living in the sticks and that Wall Street life is what suits him. However, Brian doesn't want to lose her but doesn't know what to do. After finishing with the coffee croissants for the new cafe she'll try to branch out in, Jenny lets Casey know how excited she is. However, Casey wonders where Brian is, so she suggests she goes to visit him, and at least tell him how she feels. Jenny is confused as well. She doesn't know how she feels, so Casey tells her that maybe Brian became who she wanted him to be, and not someone who he truly is, which is why he's drifting away. In perfect timing, Jenny receives a call from Brian letting her know that he loves her despite things not being the way they should be. Harry goes to Brian to let him know that he's been invited to Roger's cocktail party when Roger himself enters the room to invite Brian as well as his finance Jenny. Returning home for the weekend, time flies for Brian as he gets ready for work in no time. After telling her how hectic the life is of a worker on Wall Street, Brian lets Jenny know about Roger's party, but she's not sure about it, so she asks for some time to think. Wanting to see Tommy once again, Denise asks Jenny whether another plug could be installed in her room. Jenny promises to call Tommy, but Denise wants to find out more about him. Already in an awkward situation, she asks for 2 more plugs before returning to her room. Denise doesn't seem to be the only one that's fallen for a guy at the inn. Alice reveals to Jenny that she's been loving spending time with Mr. Albert as well, which is why he has extended his stay. Noticing that something's wrong, Alice asks Jenny how she and Brian are doing, so Jenny tells her about the party. She manages to convince Jenny to go to the party, so we see her all dressed up and ready to go. She sees Mr. Albert, who compliments her look and opens up about his relationship with Alice. With a big smile on her face, Jenny lets him know that he can stay as long as he likes. Before she leaves, she is stopped by Denise complaining about the lights in the house, and right as she's about to tell her that she can't leave her guests unattended, Tommy walks in, making her forget everything that she wanted to say. After making sure that everything's okay, Jenny leaves to catch the train. Arriving in New York, she is overwhelmed by the city, but she makes it to Brian's workplace in time. She is surprised to hear that he has an office because it's temporary, but she decides to let it slide. He is happy to see her and admits to missing her as he leans in for a kiss. Harry joins them as well, and by their looks, he realizes that he's overdressed, so heads home to change before meeting them at the party. At the party, Brian and Jenny get approached by his old boss, who pretends to be happy for him. However, Roger comes to the rescue as he lets Brian's old boss know that Brian is doing great, making him and the company proud. Embarrassed, the old boss leaves and Roger goes to get his wife so she can meet Jenny. His wife lets Jenny know that she makes the best sweets in the world and Jenny couldn't be more helpful. The gentlemen go to do some business and the ladies are left alone. However, Jenny's opinion about Roger's wife changes as she leaves a snarky comment about them living in the county before leaving for duty. Being left alone, Jenny decides to try some of the snacks the caterer has brought out, and through conversation with her, she realizes that she's not fit for the world Brian's living in, so she decides to leave. The next morning, she takes care of the goats before going to Casey's to bake. She complains about them being at the same party but a million miles apart, and even compares their relationship to hers and Derail's. Realizing that it's time to think about the future if they don't make it, Jenny straightens her blazer and gets ready for the meeting that's about to change her life. The meeting goes great. As the owner tries the cappuccino croissants, he immediately makes up his mind. However, he gives Jenny a hard time before he agrees to sell her baked goods in 3 chains. The Stenleys return to the inn as well, and when Nora finds out that Brian is in New York, she advises Jenny to call him. And that is what she does. She lets him know that they need to figure out what they're going to do because she misses him. Her words put Brian in thought because he gets up and lets Harry know that he needs to leave immediately. Harry asks him what happens after that, but Brian doesn't have the answer. Returning home, he is filled with good news about Jenny's baked goods. However, she tells him that she never imagined them to be apart. Their conversation is interrupted by Roger calling Brian, but he answers to let him know that he'll be home for a few days. Jenny lets him know that he's changing and that she doesn't want to pressure him out of doing what he loves. However, he assures her that he'll figure it out because if there's one thing he's sure of, it's that he loves her and wants to be with her. As Denise is taking a walk with her friend, they run into Tommy. Seeing him makes her stunned every time, but this time is different as he invites her to have lunch sometimes, to which she agrees. As he enters the store, they continue walking, but her friend wonders why she has a fake name, so she lets her know it's only for the reviews. Brian goes to the general store to get some paint for the hallway, but he can't escape the comments from the guys, warning him to be careful not to lose Jenny. Just as he's about to leave the store, Denise walks in looking for push pins. He lets her know that he has some, but she goes to the counter to get some of her own. Of course, the real reason being that she gets to see Tommy. Jenny serves the guests some breakfast before sitting down to enjoy hers with Brian. However, his phone rings, so he excuses himself only to tell Roger that he'll call him back. He sits down to eat, but his anxiousness is showing, so Jenny tells him to answer the phone. But it is when she finds out that he has made another deal that she starts arguing with him. The guests start feeling uncomfortable, and shortly after, they realize that they're fighting in front of them. They head outside to calm the situation down, but Jenny thinks that they're drifting apart, so she hands him the engagement ring back and asks him to think about what he wants. The next couple of days are a blur for both. Jenny has her guests to comfort her, and it puts a smile on her face when Mr. Albert extends his stay out of love. However, Brian spends his time thinking about his future, and he decides to return to Jenny and his baby goats. Returning to his home, he sees Jenny playing with the goats, so he approaches her. She greets him and welcomes him home with tears in her eyes after being sure that the county life is what he wants. Romance seems to be everywhere as Tommy and Denise will finally be going on a date. However, Denise asks Jenny to borrow some clothes since she has none. Seeing her come down the stairs looking beautiful, Tommy can't help but be stunned. They waste no time whatsoever as they finally engage in a passionate kiss. The grand opening of the inn comes as well, and Denise reveals her true identity. Instead of getting a present, she shows Jenny the great review she has written, calling the place a gem that will make you fall in love. Brian agrees as he gets on one knee, asking Jenny to marry him in the same spot once again. Tears fill her eyes as she says yes, so they cheer for them and Emily. Sitting on the swing, Jenny thanks him for the perfect ending. But he tells her that it's just the beginning.